So today, I will take you on a localization journey in my company. Just at the beginning, I just wanted to mention my journey with IHG started not that long time ago, because it was only 7 months ago. And I'll be very happy to share, the strategy that I'm trying to implement, both in my operating region, which is EMEAA, but also both influencing other regions in the organization when it comes to localization workflows. So the agenda for today. So I will start with giving you a bit of more background information about my organization, history, global presence. Then I will also give you some insights in how localization workflow is managed at IHG. And I will compare the past operating model in localization workflow with the strategy that I'm trying to implement. I will also mention the strategic partnership that we have with our vendors. And of course, we cannot miss the technology bit, which is critical when it comes to managing global content. We will also look into some challenges. One of the biggest challenges which I came across since I started working for IHG was the validation models of the content. And finally, I would try to apply all these actions and activities that I've been trying to do for IHG to the localization maturity model that probably most of you are familiar with. And finally, I will give you a bit of insight into our brand journey at IHG. So IHG, InterContinental Hotels Group, we are one of the world's leading hotel companies. At the moment, those numbers were actually updated last week. So we managed more than 5,600 properties. That translates into 843,000 guest rooms. We are present in more than 100 countries, and we are growing. So at the moment, we have more than 1,900 hotels in our development pipeline. We are also very proud to have the biggest global loyalty program called IHG Rewards Club, which is brand in itself, which currently has more than 100 million enrolled members. Over 4,100 people are employed at IHG properties and corporate offices globally, and our mission statement is to provide true hospitality for everyone. We became a standalone company in 2003, but the origins of the brand and the company goes back to the 18th century. We have 3 main operating models, regions. As you can see, we've got Americas, where almost 80% of our business and revenue is coming from. Then it's my region, which is EMEAA, so basically it's the entire world, except for Americas and China. And we've got also Greater China region, which is the smallest region, but it's growing rapidly at the moment. Our main assets are our brands. So I should probably clarify, the majority of properties with IHG branding, we don't own them. We are asset-light business model. So the majority of the properties with IHG, we manage the properties. These are franchises. IHG owns less than 10 properties, the flagship properties worldwide. So our brands are our main assets, and they are divided into 3 main categories. So the first being luxury brands, and probably you are familiar with InterContinental Hotel brands. Then we've got our upscale brands, which probably the most common would be the Crown Plaza hotels that mostly attracts business travelers. And we've got mainstream brands. So the most common brand in our portfolio would be Holiday Inn Express. And so I wanted to say that we own 17 brands because we've got 16 hotel brands plus our loyalty program. It's also IHG Rewards Club is a brand itself, but while I was having the session in the morning, I received a communication from our CEO, Keith Barr, who announced we are adding one more brand. It will be Atwood suit, and it was actually announced today. So there will be, so as of today, we have 18 IHG brands. In February 2019, so a couple of months ago, we are very happy to acquire Six Senses brand. So that definitely is going to boost our luxury halo. So that would be the brand that the distinctive feature would be the focus on spa and well-being. Localization at our IHG. So at the moment, currently we support globally 17 languages, 17 locales. And these are just the languages that are global systems we support with. On top of that, of course, we've got localization requirements for tactical campaigns, for any other hotel collaterals and so on. But officially, if you ask about language strategy, 17 locales. And these are the locales that we support currently. As you can see, there are some gaps here that I'm trying to address with the global team. I think the most important being, one variety of Spanish, French, and Brazilian, and Portuguese. So, but yeah, this is actually one of the gaps in our language strategy that we are trying to address at the moment. Localization overview. So there are two centers at IHG, how we manage localization. So the expertise, linguistic expertise is based here in Denham, in the UK. So I've got a team of translators, copywriters, who are based in markets, but they are full-time IHG employees. And I manage them from Denham office, but we've also got global translations team based in Atlanta. That team is led by program manager, and it includes translation software specialists and project executives. So what is important to mention is they are not linguists, yes? They mostly manage the systems and the projects. But if we think about how localization was done at IHG in the past, so I think until last year, IHG had a localization team based in Hamburg, in Germany. The team consisted of translators. So the objective of that team in this old model was purely operational. So basically that team was trying to compete with LSPs, but it was like an internal function which was cross-charging different departments within IHG. As you can imagine, considering the size of the company, that team faced a lot of challenges. So high volume for localization, transcreation, validation. Also the local coverage. So basically that team didn't have 17 translators, so didn't cover all the languages. It was also about the sustainability because there was only one single translator per language. They were full-time employees, so whenever they were sick, whenever they went on holidays, that localization requirement had to be outsourced externally. And also those of you who are linguists probably could question the quality of the process, because we know as a standard localization we have at least 2 independent linguists working on a content, whereas in that workflow, in-house workflow, one linguist was doing everything: translation, proofreading, editing, and getting the content to publish. At the moment, my team sits within omnichannel marketing team, in line with other marketing channels such as digital merchandising, email, mobile, and hotel, and also social community team. Since I joined IHG, I was trying to rethink how actually the model of the in-house translators could work. I also should mention that that team in Germany was disbanded as part of the transformation for growth at IHG. So I still have a few translators which are based in different markets, not Germany. So, and actually the leaders told me, it's like, Tom, you need to fix localization, what do we do? So one of the ideas that I actually had, because everyone was aware that the old model of focusing mostly on operations and trying to compete with LSPs is not going to work for such a big organization. I came up with the idea of creating Center of Excellence for Localization, which means I'm going to change a bit of the responsibilities of my team. So they are not going to be purely operational function. So what I did, at the moment, my translators, they are still involved in translation, transcreation, validations projects, but we made the decision that they will offer that service only for critical top priority content, which will be like marketing campaigns, all those revenue generating initiatives. They offer project management support in any localization transcreation workflows. So there are teams that are coming to us and we are advising them what is the best process, what is the best technology, who is the best vendor to go with this particular localization need. They also manage projects in cloud-based translation solution that we have in place. They offer the business consultancy, that's what I mentioned. They are also responsible in maintenance of localization assets, meaning they are responsible for updating style guides, IHG 10 basis, translation memory cleanups. And also, I try to give them more exposure to more strategic projects, such as, for example, they have been heavily involved in the projects in which we were trying to define the future language strategy for IHG. Where are the gaps, how we can address them, what was the business case that we could put forward to the business leaders. IHG Internal Center of Excellence is about people, meaning my translators, but also our vendors. At IHG, we always treat our vendors as our strategic partners, not only as suppliers that just deliver the translated content. And so I own that relationship with all the vendors that we are using at IHG on a global level, because one of the challenges which I also noticed in such a big organization was that different regions, they were not always consistent in the messages that we are giving to our vendors. So now all my vendors, I know all the account directors based in all continents. So they have a critical role because they advise us. You know, if we come up with a process or technology, they sometimes get back to us and saying, oh, there's a better way. Oh, we are doing that with Google. How about, did you consider that model? Did you consider that service? They share with their best practices, approaches. They can predict challenges before they actually appear. And as I mentioned, they share with their insights from other clients that they serve. And of course, the relationship is based on mutual trust. And I should probably add straight talking, which at the beginning was a bit funny, but now I think they got used to my Eastern European style. So IHG Center of Excellence is about strategy, and these are some of the areas that we are exploring with my linguists at the moment. So first of all, one of the challenges which I mentioned was the validation model. So these are the main workflows in our cloud-based solution software that we have at the moment. So they are pretty standard. So vendor is doing translation, then the second linguist from the vendor is doing proofreading. Then we've got internal validation done by either my linguist or someone from IHG, and then the content gets into published. The second one is without IHG validation. Then we have the old model workflow where IHG linguist is doing everything, all the stages, and the content gets published. And we also did some pilots with machine translation plus post-editing, but at the moment, it failed the quality criteria. So we will be probably looking into finding the right type of content for the machine translation use. So the two main will be number 1 and 2, and as you can see, the only difference between them is the validation, internal validation piece. Historically at IHG, when I joined the company, I was quite surprised, but everyone believed that it doesn't really matter who translated the content, which vendor, what type of content that was. Everything has to be validated because the content coming from our vendors is not good enough. So there wasn't much trust in the vendors. A combination of reasons why that was. Probably, people didn't have much visibility or understanding of the process. And that model was also not very sustainable for the company because of the volume of the content that the expectation was to be validated. Also, when you were asking someone who was doing the validation on the side, it was more like a favor then, and it added to the speed to market. It also created a lot of validation noise, I call it. So basically, if you are not a linguist, you try to amend good for better, which not necessarily is required. And because of that, IHG as a company came across additional costs, because if you send to the supplier 100 amends, 90 being preferential changes, they're going to charge you for implementing that. And this next one is my favorite. It's about politics, power struggle, and personal enmity of the validator. So basically, we know that if you are asked to assess the quality of the translation of your content in your mother tongue, some people get very emotional about that. And we know that too many emotions can obscure independent, objective judgment. So we try to look at the type of content and try to categorize that based on 3 very simple questions. How critical is the content? Is it client-facing? Is it a high-risk content? By doing the classifications, we could actually make the decision, is validation needed? How much of the validation is needed? So based on that, we could actually, by looking at the type of the content, we could also try to explore what process will be needed. This is a slide which was shared by my technology supplier. So as you can see, for any critical top priority content, it will be mostly marketing campaigns. It will be transcreation service, which is the longest, the most expensive, but the quality is non-negotiable here. But then we can look into other workflows, starting with translation plus editing, just translation. So that was the internal workflow done by my linguist. And then 3 different machine translation options based on the type of the content. We also explore the idea of the brand ambassador. We know that brand ambassador is the term coming from marketing. We all heard about social media influencers, yes, that are paid by the companies for promoting their products. So when we applied that definition to localization, of course, it will be someone who is paid by the company, qualified linguist, that their task will be actually to make sure to be like a brand guardian, make sure that transcreated localized content follows the brand guidelines such as tone of voice, style, register terminology, and so on. At the moment, my linguists are brand ambassadors for all IHG brands. When it comes for the languages they do not cover, what we actually came up with, we started creating translators databases of our vendors. So in the past approach, as you probably know, it is the vendor who decides who is working on my project. But since I joined the company, I said no. It's like, for critical campaign, I want to know your linguist, and I want to make the decision who is going to work on this critical campaign. Why is that? Because we keep the translators database of linguists of all the suppliers, and based on their performance, how they performed in the past, what the feedback was, I can, for example, make the decision that, for example, if we get this particular Russian translator doing this global campaign, probably, it's going to be a good job because this individual delivered really good quality Russian content in the past. Some vendors at the beginning, they were not very keen to share that information, but I think, as I mentioned about this relationship based on trust, and we are just too big to be poaching on freelance translators, basically, and I think they know that. And I can tell you that it really helped with the speed to market, with the decisions about whether the validation is needed or not. When we talk about the processes, we know that in such global organizations, IHG, everything happens in agile setting. So when we look at the lots of projects and localization projects in my company, historically, the projects were less frequent, they were bigger in size, and the turnaround time didn't have to be that quick. However, now, especially if we think about our websites, about other channels, we tend to observe much higher frequency of small jobs, which have to be turned around very quickly. So to actually adapt to this agile workflow, we have to explore different technologies that are actually available. So traditionally, in the past, when we talk about translation technology, we would talk about translation memories, terminology software. However, other areas that you can actually see on the slides, this is something that we are exploring with our vendors, just again to meet the challenges and the requirements of the agile localization workflow in a global organization. So when we talk also about the translation workflow at IHG, we can probably, you heard about the concept of augmented translation workflows, which basically means that there is technology, there is some kind of artificial intelligence that based on data can make the decisions for you. It's important to mention here that technology in this augmented translation workflow is not here to actually replace a human being, because a human translator is still in the center of the entire process. What the technology actually enables you here is to, some of the decisions they can make the decisions for you. So one of examples, of course, like cloud-based TM solution, that's definitely helps, in the agile setting, light out project management. So we've got in our translation solution some settings. So based on the type of content, based on the language, based on the team, the projects, once they are ingested into our translation software, they automatically get assigned into translation workflow. We are also using APIs with lots of, for different channels. Just to mention AEM connector that is connected to our translation software for our landing pages of the tactical campaigns and global campaigns, and also Story that is integrated with our translation software. This is for email marketing. So basically we try to reduce the fact that you have to send the content through emails or any FTPs. All our translation memory assets are also stored in the cloud, so they are available to anyone that starts working on IHG account. And number 6, dynamic workflows based on quality confidence score. What that means is I can get some reporting data from the software, information like what was the percentage of amends applied to the localized content for specific jobs, projects, teams. Then I can also get information about how long it took the review or validation stage. As linguist, this is something I challenge my technology supplier. Okay, so that will give me the quantitative data because the number of amends. How about the qualitative insights? As we know, some validators, I mentioned that before, they are more fussy than others, so they will definitely amend more than others, which doesn't indicate that the original translation was of poor quality. So based on these metrics, I can, for example, make the decisions about workflows. So for example, just to give you an idea, if I got new content, I leverage my translation memory. For any fuzzy matches which are more than 95%, I can decide, for example, no review stage is needed, which reduces the time and cost. If I've got any specific language or translator, and I see that in the past, less than 2% of amendments were implemented at the review or validation stage, I can make the decision, no validation is needed if this particular linguist is working on this project. Again, it increases time, speed to market, but also the cost. And of course, depending on the content, I can make the decision which dynamic workflow could be assigned. However, what is worth mentioning that all these idea of dynamic workflows is subject to content type, specific language, and the resources that are available. So all these initiatives that I'm trying to implement at IHG is actually, I think it goes nice with this localization maturity model that probably many of you are familiar with. So what I would say that my company is probably somewhere on a managed, going into the direction of optimized level. In the past model, the first level was reactive, meaning It was purely operational. Linguistic standards were not very well clarified. There was a lot of manual exchange of files. Translation workflows are logged in country silos, meaning like different teams in different regions, they were doing, there are processes, there are things, there are suppliers, there was no visibility, no consistency. And what is also very important, and this is something I notice in many organizations, that the localization point person lacked linguistic expertise and experience, so that also created some problems. At the moment, we've got centralized function in place who served, stakeholders on a global level, and we also have that is very important. I've got a lot of procurement background, so since I joined IHG, the first week I reached out, I asked my bosses, like, who is our procurement support? And basically the answer was, why do you need procurement? So I reached out to them, and at the beginning it was also interesting because they didn't know what I want, but now they completely understand how important it is in the organization that you have actually procurement support. Many of the initiatives, when I negotiate some rates, charges, when I addressed some, there were kind of some suppliers that would be overselling to us. Once you get procurement with you, it really helps. I also recently organized RFP for our current suppliers just to get more clarity on the pricing and processes, just to make sure that everyone, whenever they send us a quote, they are quoting for the same type of service. More and more teams are reaching out to me because they know that we can actually offer some localization expertise. We still need to educate a lot of stakeholders because, for many teams, localization still remains, to be at the end of the production chain, which is not great. And localization is managed by linguists, by the professionals, that people who speak languages, people who have translation experience, and I think this is critical for the entire management piece in a global organization. So again, we can see the transformation from the old model, from purely operational focus on the more strategic focus. And what is important when you create excellence center, you just need to make sure that it's excellence center, not cost center or loss center.